Imagine this. Your mother calls you in tears. She's just lost her entire retirement savings to what seemed like a legitimate investment opportunity. The advisor had perfect credentials, testimonials from people in her community, and promised guaranteed returns that would let her finally stop working at 65. When you investigate, you discover the advisor used sophisticated psychological tactics specifically targeting older women, creating artificial time pressure and isolating victims from family members who might ask difficult questions. Your mother isn't just financially devastated, she's deeply ashamed, wondering how she could have been so thoroughly deceived by someone she trusted completely. This isn't just a story I made up. According to the FBI, Americans lost over $3.5 billion to financial fraud last year alone, with the average elderly victim losing $120,000, often their entire life savings. And these are just the reported cases. Most victims never come forward, too embarrassed to admit they were manipulated. Here's something that might shock you. According to research from Princeton University, the average person faces over 200 manipulation attempts every single week. From the subtle tricks in the apps we use daily to the emotional tactics used in our closest relationships, these techniques are everywhere, and they're only getting more sophisticated. Have you ever walked away from a conversation feeling vaguely uncomfortable, like something wasn't quite right, but you couldn't put your finger on it? That's your gut recognizing manipulation before your conscious mind can identify it. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly what triggered that feeling and what to do about it. What if you could see through these tactics? What if you could recognize manipulation before becoming its victim? This is where an unlikely mentor enters the picture. Niccolò Machiavelli, the 16th century political philosopher whose name has become synonymous with strategic cunning. When most people hear Machiavellian, they think evil genius or manipulative schemer, but this completely misses who Machiavelli actually was. Living in Renaissance Italy during political chaos, Machiavelli wasn't creating a manual for tyrants. He was documenting the raw reality of human behavior that most philosophers were too afraid to acknowledge. Machiavelli wrote, "Everyone sees what you appear to be, few experience what you really are." Think about that for a second. How many times have you been completely fooled by someone's carefully crafted image, only to discover their true nature after the damage was done? Take Elizabeth Holmes and Theranos. She deliberately adopted Steve Jobs' black turtleneck, lowered her voice by several octaves, and crafted a compelling changing the world narrative that convinced seasoned investors to pour billions into technology that simply didn't work. The perception she created was so powerful that even when whistleblowers came forward, many still couldn't see past the image she had constructed. This isn't just about business. Think about that perfect couple on social media whose relationship is actually toxic behind closed doors, or the wellness influencer promoting natural supplements while privately battling health issues caused by those very products. Perception management is everywhere around us. Machiavelli recognized another uncomfortable truth about human psychology. We're primarily driven by self-interest. While that might sound cynical, modern behavioral science consistently confirms this view. Consider how many ethical companies immediately abandoned their values during the pandemic when profits were threatened, or how quickly ordinary people adopt problematic behaviors when given power without accountability. But here's where most people get Machiavelli wrong. He wasn't celebrating manipulation, he was exposing it so people could navigate a world where these tactics exist. As he wrote, "It is necessary for a prince who wishes to maintain himself to learn how not to be good, and to use this knowledge or not use it according to necessity." For us, this doesn't mean becoming manipulative ourselves. It means understanding these tactics so thoroughly that we can spot them instantly when they're used against us. Every manipulative approach, whether executed by a marketing executive, a deceitful colleague, or a toxic partner, relies on certain fundamental principles. Machiavelli identified these centuries ago, and modern psychological research has confirmed and expanded upon his observations. Machiavelli famously wrote that, "It is far safer to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." This isn't just political theory, it's a recognition of how fear bypasses our logical thinking. When we're afraid, the emotional part of our brain takes over, shutting down our ability to think critically. It's like your brain's security system overriding your rational thought. This explains why fear is so effective for everything from selling insurance, what would happen to your family if you died tomorrow, to keeping people in harmful relationships. You'll never find anyone better. Have you ever noticed how quickly panic buying spreads? Remember the toilet paper shortage of 2020? Just a few viral videos showing empty shelves were enough to trigger nationwide shortages. A powerful demonstration of how fear overrides logic on a massive scale. When we're afraid, we stop questioning and start reacting. Now let's talk about another powerful tactic: artificial reciprocity. Ever wondered why free samples work so well? Machiavelli understood that humans feel deeply compelled to repay debts, even ones we never asked for. Men are more ready to repay an injury than a benefit, he observed, because gratitude is a burden and revenge a pleasure. This psychological insight explains why manipulation through obligation is so effective. Research on the psychology of persuasion documents how waiters who give diners 2 mints up front increase tips by 14%, and those who personalize the gesture, returning with a second mint, see tips jump by 23%, proof that manufactured reciprocity works. That's not generosity. It's calculated manipulation of our innate sense of obligation. Similarly, the free personality test that leads to expensive courses creates the same feeling of debt that can be exploited. Have you ever felt strangely obligated to buy something after taking advantage of something free? That's this principle at work. Finally, Machiavelli advised rulers to divide and rule, recognizing that isolated individuals are easier to control. This pattern of isolation isn't limited to politics. It appears across many situations. Consider the cult run by Keith Raniere, which originally started as a success program but systematically isolated members from their families, labeled outsiders as suppressives, and gradually normalized increasingly extreme behaviors. This isolation was the critical factor that enabled the group to evolve into something much darker. The key question to ask yourself becomes, who benefits when you're cut off from alternative perspectives or sources of support? In nearly every case, it's not you. Machiavelli understood something profound about human nature. We're not the rational beings we imagine ourselves to be. We're creatures of habit, emotional shortcuts, and blind spots, all of which can be exploited. One particularly effective strategy is what psychologists now call the foot-in-the-door technique. You've heard the metaphor about a frog and gradually heating water that won't jump out because the change is too subtle to notice until it's too late. Dr. Robert Cialdini's research demonstrates that people who agree to small requests are significantly more likely to comply with larger related requests later. Think about how streaming services have systematically increased prices. Netflix started at $7.99, then $8.99, then $9.99. Small enough increases that most people didn't cancel. Now, many subscribers pay over $20 monthly, more than double the original price, without ever having made a conscious decision to accept such a dramatic increase. The same pattern appears in controlling relationships. Have you noticed how boundary violations often start small before escalating over time? Another powerful manipulation tactic is using your self-image against you. Remember Theranos again. When scientists raised concerns about the technology, Holmes didn't address the technical issues. She reframed skepticism as opposition to female leadership in tech. This brilliant manipulation made allies defend her not on scientific grounds, but on identity grounds. Questioning the technology became equated with questioning women in tech. We see this constantly in marketing. Real men drink bourbon. Conscious moms choose organic. These aren't product claims. They're identity hooks designed to bypass rational product evaluation. Once you've publicly committed to an identity, you'll often make irrational decisions to maintain consistency with that image. When was the last time you bought something not because you needed it, but because it aligned with how you see yourself? Perhaps most insidious of all is the power of unpredictable reinforcement. B.F. Skinner's foundational research on operant conditioning proved that unpredictable rewards create 3 times stronger behavioral addictions than predictable ones. This explains why manipulators alternate between praise and criticism to keep targets hooked. This explains why slot machines are more addictive than most drugs, why the hot-cold cycle in toxic relationships creates powerful attachment, and why you find yourself constantly checking certain social media accounts even when they rarely deliver satisfaction. This single mechanism drives gambling addiction, toxic relationship patterns, and problematic social media use. Once you recognize this pattern, you'll see it everywhere. From manipulative bosses who alternate between harsh criticism and excessive praise to platforms designed to deliver dopamine hits at unpredictable intervals. Have you ever found yourself unable to put down your phone even though most of what you see doesn't actually make you happy? That's the power of unpredictable reinforcement at work. Now that we understand how manipulation works, let's transform Machiavelli's insights into practical defenses you can use starting today. While his writings are often interpreted as a guide for manipulators, they contain equally valuable wisdom for those who wish to protect themselves. The first defensive principle comes from Machiavelli's observation that the promise given was a necessity of the past. The broken promise is a necessity of the present. In simple terms, people will say whatever serves them in the moment. So how do you protect yourself? Start noticing patterns instead of promises. When someone makes commitments, mentally catalog how often they've fulfilled similar promises previously. Studies show this simple practice reduces vulnerability to deception by up to 62%. You might discover that your supportive friend only reached out when they needed favors, despite always promising to catch up properly soon. Remember how Fire Festival founder Billy McFarlane had a history of fraudulent businesses before creating the infamous island disaster? The pattern was there, but investors focused on promises rather than past behavior. Ask yourself, has this person consistently done what they said they would do in the past? Their track record is a far better predictor than their current words. A second defensive strategy emerges from Machiavelli's advice to never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception. For self-protection, this translates to being suspicious when situations seem unusually easy, or when others are being excessively accommodating. Psychological research has demonstrated that manipulators often create artificial ease early in relationships or negotiations, deliberately removing obstacles and friction to lower defensive instincts before introducing exploitative elements. Look at how free dating apps operate. The initial sign-up takes seconds, but the real cost comes in privacy compromises, premium features, and psychological manipulation designed to keep you engaged rather than actually finding a relationship. The ease of entry is deliberately designed to lower defenses. When something seems unusually easy or convenient, ask yourself, what's the real price I might pay later? Nothing truly valuable comes without some appropriate friction. Another powerful defense comes from Machiavelli's famous quote, "It is better to be feared than loved if you cannot be both." For self-protection, this means recognizing that respect and appropriate boundaries are more reliable safeguards than constantly seeking approval. Try this experiment. For 1 week before agreeing to any request, ask yourself, am I doing this to be helpful or to be liked? Then wait 24 hours before committing to anything where the answer is to be liked. Studies have found that manipulative people can identify people pleasers within minutes of conversation, unconsciously recognizing verbal and physical signals of someone prioritizing approval over authenticity. Furthermore, Machiavelli advised leaders to be strategic about information sharing. For self-defense, this means recognizing that personal information is valuable currency that should be distributed thoughtfully. Research from Columbia University demonstrates that manipulators often share seemingly vulnerable information early to create false intimacy that encourages reciprocal oversharing. This asymmetrical information exchange creates vulnerability that can be exploited later. Look at how Mark Zuckerberg famously called early Facebook users dumb for trusting him with their personal information. The entire business model of social media relies on encouraging oversharing, while the companies themselves remain incredibly secretive about their own operations. A perfect information asymmetry. Before sharing personal information, ask yourself, has this person earned this level of trust through consistent actions over time? Remember that trust should be built gradually, not given immediately. Machiavelli emphasized seeing distant things without moving, anticipating future consequences before they arise. Most manipulation succeeds because targets only consider immediate effects rather than long-term implications. Train yourself to ask, and then what happens? 3 times when evaluating any situation. This simple practice reveals potential consequences that might otherwise remain hidden. Consider how cigarette companies fought health warnings for decades. They understood that the second-order effect of health warnings would be increased regulation, and the third-order effect would be cultural shifts in smoking perception. They weren't just fighting labels, they were fighting a domino effect they accurately predicted decades in advance. When facing any decision or offer, ask yourself, what might this lead to 6 months from now? A year from now? 5 years from now? Machiavelli wrote during the Renaissance, but his insights into human psychology are perhaps even more relevant in our digital age, where manipulation has become both more sophisticated and more pervasive. The vulgar crowd always is taken by appearances, and the world consists chiefly of the vulgar, Machiavelli observed, a principle that finds its fullest expression in our digital landscape. Tech companies have weaponized this insight, designing interfaces and algorithms that capitalize on our attraction to appearances while obscuring their manipulative mechanics. Betting apps exemplify this manipulation perfectly, presenting gambling as casual entertainment through sleek interfaces, vibrant animations, and celebratory sounds that trigger dopamine rushes. These apps deploy near-miss algorithms that create the appearance of almost winning, keeping users engaged despite consistent losses. While users fixate on the captivating visual experience and temporary wins, the mathematical certainty of long-term losses remains hidden behind the appearance of harmless fun and potential wealth. Consider how social media platforms employ what Machiavelli might have called the illusion of choice. He noted that rulers should make the people believe they have choice while carefully controlling the actual options available. Modern platforms have perfected this technique, creating the sensation of free exploration while algorithmically guiding your attention towards specific content designed to maximize engagement. Have you ever noticed how you start watching one video on YouTube and an hour later find yourself deep in content you never intended to consume? That's not coincidence. It's carefully engineered psychological manipulation. Another modern manifestation of Machiavellian tactics is the exploitation of urgency. Machiavelli recognized that people make poorer decisions under time pressure. Think about all those countdown timers on shopping websites. Amazon was actually fined 10 million euros in Italy for fake urgency tactics like misleading countdown timers and false scarcity messages. These techniques worked so well that they persist despite growing regulatory pushback. To combat this, develop the habit of questioning urgency. When faced with time-limited offers or opportunities, ask, why is this deadline necessary? What happens if I wait? Is this urgency serving my interests or someone else's? Creating this mental space often reveals that supposed emergencies are actually manufactured pressure tactics. Finally, Machiavelli advised leaders to divide the power of your enemies. Today's information ecosystem has weaponized this principle through outrage amplification. Internal documents from major social platforms revealed algorithms deliberately promoting divisive content, not from ideological motivation, but because conflict drives engagement. Research shows moral outrage spreads faster online, with posts using emotionally charged language gaining significantly more traction than neutral content. This insight explains why your feed seems increasingly populated with content designed to provoke rather than inform. The Cambridge Analytica scandal revealed how precisely targeted divisive messaging could fracture social cohesion in both the Brexit vote and the 2016 US election. This wasn't traditional persuasion, but sophisticated psychological profiling used to identify and exploit societal divides. Before engaging with inflammatory content, ask yourself, who benefits from my outrage here? The answer is rarely me, and almost always someone's engagement metrics and advertising revenue. We focused primarily on defending against manipulation, but Machiavelli's work also contains profound insights about wielding influence ethically. While The Prince is often reduced to a manual for ruthlessness, careful reading reveals sophisticated thinking about leadership and power that remains relevant today. Machiavelli wrote that it is necessary for a prince to possess the nature of both the fox and the lion, meaning that true effectiveness requires both strategic thinking, the fox, and courage, the lion. For ethical influence, this means developing both the wisdom to identify manipulation and the courage to confront it directly. Think of it like this. The fox sees the trap, but the lion isn't afraid to roar when necessary. In your own life, when you identify manipulation, address it directly but without unnecessary hostility. Simple phrases like, "I've noticed this pattern and it concerns me," establish boundaries while maintaining connection. Another ethical principle from Machiavelli concerns what he called necessary injury. He advised that if difficult actions are necessary, they should be done all at once, while benefits should be distributed little by little. This principle manifests in ethical leadership when transparent companies implement necessary price increases clearly rather than through hidden fees, while distributing benefits gradually over time. In your relationships, this translates to having necessary difficult conversations directly, rather than through hints or partial discussions that prolong discomfort, while expressing appreciation regularly in small moments rather than saving it all for special occasions. Perhaps Machiavelli's most profound ethical insight was his recognition that true stability requires addressing the legitimate needs of all stakeholders. He wrote that a leader must avoid being hated, which requires respecting people's fundamental needs for safety, property, and dignity. Contemporary research has validated this insight. Decades of Gallup research reveal that workplaces combining accountability with respect for individual needs outperform those relying on fear or control. The most influential people in any field are those who create genuine value while maintaining appropriate boundaries, a balance Machiavelli himself advocated despite his ruthless reputation. Have you noticed how the most respected people you know tend to combine clear principles with genuine care for others? If you've started to recognize patterns of manipulation in your own life, remember, awareness is the first and most important step toward freedom. You can't change what you don't see. It's common to feel guilt after realizing you've been manipulated. You might ask yourself, how could I have fallen for this? But don't be too hard on yourself. These tactics work because they tap into universal aspects of human psychology. Even the most intelligent, educated people can can be influenced when the right psychological triggers are pulled. The wise man does at once what the fool does finally, Machiavelli observed. His point is clear. The sooner you recognize manipulation and take action, the less damage you'll sustain. Waiting until manipulation becomes unbearable only increases its cost to your life and well-being. Once you see the manipulation clearly, you usually have three options. One is direct confrontation, naming the tactics specifically. For example, I notice you're using artificial urgency to pressure my decision. Another is strategic disengagement, simply removing yourself from the manipulative environment. And the third is boundary reinforcement, setting clear consequences for manipulative behavior. Which path you choose depends entirely on the situation and the relationship. There's no one-size-fits-all solution, but the key is this. Once you're aware, you gain choices where before there were none. As you move forward, start developing what psychologists call strategic awareness, the ability to spot manipulation without becoming cynical about human connection. The goal isn't paranoia, it's discernment, learning to tell the difference between genuine relationships and manipulative ones. Remember the story about the mother who lost her retirement savings? With the tools you've learned today, you're now better equipped to protect not only yourself, but also the vulnerable people in your life. You can help them see the patterns before the damage is done. True power doesn't come from controlling others through psychological games. It comes from clarity, knowing your own values and boundaries. As Machiavelli once wrote, "Where the willingness is great, the difficulties cannot be great." If you found this helpful, hit the like button and share it with someone who might need to hear it. And subscribe for more deep dives into the psychology that can transform your relationships and protect your autonomy. The best defense against manipulation isn't constant vigilance or suspicion. It's building a life surrounded by people who value real connection over control. Now that's a Machiavellian insight worth embracing. Thanks for being here. Until next time. Question thoughtfully, connect authentically, and live strategically.